This is the Rebel Author Podcast, where we talk about books, business, and occasionally bad words. Hello, Rebels, and welcome to episode 283 of the Rebel Author Podcast. Today, I am joined by the one and only fucking incredible Charlie Albers, who is the voice of Octavia Beaumont, the main character in my latest series, the Kingdom of Immortal Lovers vampire series, and holy crap, does Charlie have a voice. So I cannot wait for you to listen to this. Of course, she's just speaking in her normal voice during the episode. But if you do nothing else today, go and listen to the sample of my book one, House of Crimson Hearts, on Audible or wherever you Audible. I think that one's still exclusive to Audible, so go listen on Audible just so that you get to hear her absolutely stunning voice. I think it's my favourite audiobook voice ever, actually. So anyway, go listen. So to a comment on Charlotte Duckworth's episode, Matt says valuable insights as I start researching great author websites so I can update mine. Thank you. So in personal news and updates, I'm always a little bit hesitant to start this section every week at the moment because I have been on a fucking roller coaster ride of emotions. This has been, without doubt, the hardest thing I've ever done in this career so far. And by this, I mean the fulfillment warehouse. Like, I will happily barrel into shit, just assuming I'm going to do it and it will be fine and it will be easy and we'll figure out the solutions to things. And I tend to do that all whilst completely obliterating from my mind the fact that I personally hate details, process, and troubleshooting. Which are the three key things you need for any new setup. So why I continue to do this to myself and continue to bring on these new income streams and these new projects, I don't know. However, I'm just going to give you a few things that I have learnt in the last week. So the first thing that I have learnt is that you can create any process you want as an intellectual exercise. So, for example, we've been doing like packing processes or allotting freebie processes. On paper, they can seem really simple. And then when you actually try to implement them, they become very, very complicated, especially to anybody who doesn't understand your books or the industry as a whole. So, for example, I've been having to teach my mum, because my mum has come to my rescue and been helping me to pack over the last couple of weeks. And she obviously hasn't read my books and doesn't know all of the little names. So, like the series name versus the book name versus the covers versus the tropes. So the very fact that, I can call my Kingdom of Immortal Lovers series that, or the House of Crimson series, or Vampire series, or House series, and all those names mean the same thing. But only people who've either read the series or know my work intimately know that. And so trying to explain these things to people who don't understand it is where processes that you have created in an intellectual space, i.e. on paper, on a screen, just don't work. So keep it simple, stupid is my motto. I learnt that when I was in the cadets and my sergeant major used to shout when we were learning how to teach other kids, keep it simple, stupid. Very un-PC, I would say. But anyway, that is how I remember it. And so we've had to simplify down a lot of things. I've also had to buy more racking because even in organising, it's even little things like when I first went in and I just packed everything away, I hadn't necessarily thought about where we would be going to the most, what type of packaging we would be reaching for the most. Well, you want those on like sort of eye level, hand level, and then anything that you don't use as often or the thing that you use the least, you either put at the bottom or at the very top where you're not going to have to stretch for it. very often. So these like practical things, I seem to have learned so many practical things. Other things, we had a actual fucking nightmare trying to integrate with DPD, who's our shipping partner. We were meant to go live on Friday last week. It is Wednesday, the 19th of February, and we only managed to go live sort of partially at, in the evening of Friday. And come Monday, when I was supposed to have the new girl start, we were in chaos. And so I had actually said to her on the Saturday, I'm really sorry, but like, we're going to have to delay the start because I don't know what I'm doing. And I couldn't knowingly bring a new person into chaos, and because you can't teach them. So that's what I've been trying to do this week, is get to the point where actually, everything has a process. Everything is labelled, right? You have to label everything in the unit. So yeah, this is like just peeling just a tiny bit of the lid off of all of the shit that we've had to go through. But actually, I definitely thought I'd made a mistake. I'm not gonna lie. I will hold my hands up, and partway through last week, partway through Friday, I was pretty sure I'd made a mistake. I've also had to very rapidly change some things around. So freedom is a really big value of mine. I don't want to feel trapped. I don't want to feel like I have to do something. And with the collections, so DPD come and collect, they're collecting every day, which means I have to be there every day. I don't want to be there every day. So we are lowering the collections to probably 2 to 3 times a week. And I can also pick and choose the days that we have the collections. So that has made me feel better. So for example, I'm not having a collection tomorrow because I'm going to London with Chloe. So that has really, really helped. So I will pick and choose on probably on a Sunday night which collections I'm having. Now, the other thing that I've done is I've had to buy another computer and put it into the unit. And the reason for that is that if we don't have a computer in there, connected to the printers, the label printers, the packing sheet printer, and with access to the DPD portal, then I have to physically be there every single day to ensure that the labels get printed. So it does mean things like I have to give access to my Shopify, either to my mum or to somebody who is going to work with me. So these are all crazy things. Other crazy things, one of my team members is at the point where under UK law, I basically am her employer, which means I have to employ her. So I'm now having to go through learning contracts and employment law, and the fact that you don't actually need a contract, you need a written statement of particulars. Didn't know that. Pensions, all of this stuff. So basically, you can see why I thought middle of last week I'd made a very big fucking mistake. Now I'm getting through some of the hard stuff. Actually, between Mum and I, we're only having to pack half a dozen parcels each a day. Now, of course, in the busier times, that is not going to be the case. Like, we're already getting physical pre-orders for Architecti, and I'm pretty sure for Curses, we had circa 500 physical pre-orders on the website, which Book Vault dealt with. So there will be times when that is not the case and we do need all hands on deck. But at the moment, it's actually okay. And between Mum and I, we're kind of handling it and it's not taking up too much time. But I think that's because we have spent the last 2 weeks doing it and we're now in a rhythm. But that said, I still want to hand off everything to somebody else, but I have decided I'm not going to do that until I have the computer in place, because I still have to set up the computer. So I basically bought myself a new computer and I'm putting my old computer in the unit, so I've got to swap everything around. So until all of that's done, until like the printer modules or whatever they're called, drivers, are installed on the computer there, and I've taught my mum how to download everything. I can only teach one person at a time. Hello, #focus. But I can, because it's just too overwhelming for me. So my intention is to bring her in, the new person in, probably another 2 weeks. Maybe 3 at the most, just because we also have the Kickstarter launch. So I legitimately cannot do there's only so much I can do. And yes, bring her in would help, but not if I bring her into chaos where I cannot simply hand her a sheet that's like, this is step 1, this is step 2, this is step 3. So this has been a real lesson in what do you need in order to bring new staff in? What do you need in order to be able to teach someone else something? It's all good and well, like my mum having to handle the chaos, but she's my mum. So, you know. So yeah, it has been a wild learning curve. However, I can already see the income is increasing because the per book price now has dropped. And yeah, just all kinds of stuff. So I can see that we will do well. This will work. Especially because we've now brought on things like our art packs, our foiled bookmarks. Like we're starting to get merch lines in, and it's so funny because you set up a couple of merch lines and more people ask for other merch. So we're getting lots and lots of merch requests. So anyway, I am not quite through the what the fuck have I done, but I would say I am 80% of the way through that, and I only have like 20% left. I definitely feel better. Things are going a lot smoother, a lot faster. But holy shit, there have been so many niggles and things that we've had to work out. And so this last week, I definitely slowed down the words. I think I'm at 12,000 words in the novella, but the novella is short. I am still hoping that by the end of next week, I will have finished it, especially because from, I would say, the end of... So from probably Friday, I should be just working on words, save any kind of, well, the odd packing of a box. But... yes, I'm hoping that from Friday, 99 or 90% of all the shit will have been handled and dealt with, and then I will be back to words. It does mean that my whole production timeline has been skewed, but this happens literally every single year. Last year, I did the webinar and the Kickstarter, and that blew the whole year off course, and I did that in the first quarter of last year. So apparently this is a me habit. I just fuck everything up in the beginning of the year. Now, I do have some exciting news. I have some very exciting news. So there is an award for indie authors called the Selfies, and it is presented at London Book Fair every year. Joanna Penn actually won it last year, and she was the one that suggested I should apply. So I did, thinking, oh, yeah. And I've been shortlisted, which is so exciting. And this is for House of Crimson Hearts. So I'm ridiculously excited. It gets presented on, I believe, Tuesday the 11th of March. So keep your fingers crossed, especially because it's my birthday the day before. So that would be a lovely birthday surprise if I did win. But yeah, so I'm very excited by that. I'm also very excited to be getting back to words, and I can feel it now. Like I can feel the fact that the words are now chomping at the bit to come out, which is always good because that's how I prefer to write anyway. But also that, the calm is now approaching after the storm of what I created. And the last bit of exciting news is that I have smashed my highest goal, relaunch followers for Kickstarter. So the last Kickstarter, we started with 718 followers. So my base goal was then 719. Like I wanted to hit 719. So that was my good goal. Better goal was 1,000. Best goal was 1,250. And we have just surpassed that. We have... Oh, actually, I have not checked this morning. We have, ladies, gentlemen, non-binary friends, 1,256 followers. What the fuck? What the actual fuck? 1,256? Are you kidding me? We still have 2 weeks to go. And, oh my God, I can't even. I literally can't even. I can't. What? Anyway, so this Kickstarter launches on the 4th of March. And... I can't. I can't even talk. I actually can't even talk about it because I'm too afraid to hope and dream for some big numbers that I would... Look, I think we all know what I want. I think we all know what I'm alluding to, and we can just pretend that we all know, and I'm not saying it out loud because I can't. Because in my head I am. Don't get me wrong. And I'm writing it down so I can manifest that shit. But, yeah, I can't say it out loud. I literally can't. I'm too scared. But you guys know. Okay, cool. All right. that's it from me. I think I have bollocksed on for far too long today, as usual. So we have a Rebel of the Week, Melissa. Melissa says, I was 3 or 4 years old and in daycare. Already love this story. Normally I was a pretty obedient, rule-following child, but not that day. Love this story. It had rained recently and a corner of the playground was muddy. I was wandering through the mud when my boot got stuck. Rather than pulling the boot out, I just pulled my feet out of the boots and started walking around the sticky mud in my socks. I can still remember the sensation of how good it felt. It was fun. So fun that I convinced a couple of my friends to join me in the mud without boots. When the teachers finally realised what was going on, I was scolded, but unrepentant. They also gave my mum an earful at pickup time. My mum was chill and told them it was just mud. I believe she was more annoyed than they were annoyed. I still don't mind getting muddy feet. I still don't mind getting muddy and always encourage my kids to get muddy. But I'm more careful now as I'm the one who has to clean up. Oh my God, I love that story. That's so cute. Oh, it's adorable. Oh, please do send in stories like this. I love cute stories like this. This is adorable. If you would like to be the Rebel of the Week, please do send in your story. We are still low. We didn't get very many, so please, please, please do send in your Rebel story. It can be any kind of rebellion, something big, something small, or something in between. You can email your Rebel story to Becca over on rebelauthorpodcast@gmail.com. No new patrons this week, but a huge thank you to all of my existing patrons. If you would like to get early access to all of the episodes, as well as bonus content like our Poison and Parlay, community chit-chat, catch-up sessions, then you can from as little as $2 a month by visiting patreon.com/Sasha Black. That's it from me. Let's get on with the episode. Hello and welcome to the Rebel Author Podcast. Today I'm joined by Charlie Albers. Charlie is an award-winning actor living near New York City with her family and 2 Maltese dogs, where she records from her gorgeous coastal studio under the names of Ali Rose and Charlie Albers. Some of her clients include the BBC, Disney, Netflix, Spotify, and an author you might have heard of called Ruby Rowe, and many more. With 75 audiobooks and rising to her name, Charlie's voice is in demand for audio productions that need grit, rasp, and her signature husky texture. Hello and welcome.
Hello. Thank you so much for inviting me on. It's lovely to meet you and chat with you.
It is a real honour because, and I don't typically fangirl, but you're going to get it now because you are the voice of Octavia, of which you have sent a whole community of lesbians feral for this character.
Wow.
I just want to say thank you because you made my words sound incredible. Thank you so
my
much.
gosh, no, thank you.
Before we begin, would you like to tell everyone, I guess, like a little bit about you? Like, what is your journey? How did you get to where you are today with voice acting?
Yeah, so my journey into acting and voice acting in particular it's not really traditional in the sense that I didn't go to acting college or a conservatory. I studied theatre studies at high school, or school, I should say, in the UK. And I danced ballet with the Royal Academy. And so I acted and danced on stage at the Theatre Royal and Bristol Old Vic. But I actually trained as a chef, developing recipes for food manufacturing companies who supply companies like Marks and Spencer's and Sainsbury's. My education was food science and psychology. And then pre-kids, I was working in global communications at board level. So very different, very, very corporate. Great for understanding, marketing, PR, advertising and consumer behavior. And then I really sort of returned back to acting when I moved to the States in 2015 and I felt so lost and really, really homesick. I mean, it was awful. And someone recommended I do something creative. So I did. I decided to take a few acting classes and dived straight into taking classes every week in the city and gradually just built up my business bit by bit, joined ACX, found some authors, got signed by some agents, finally got sort of the BBC and Disney and yeah, started working with Podium and various other producers and publishers, and it's just kind of spiraled and grown into this amazing career. And I sort of dived straight in just before the pandemic hit. I bought myself a booth. So I was recording in this little 4x4 booth in my basement. And as my business has grown, I moved house and built my studio, and that's where I am.
I love it. Like, I would love to know about the ballet a little bit, like, because that is left of field and not what I was expecting at all. And also the chefing, like, that also wasn't what I was expecting. What did you take from the training, like as a chef, and also did you take anything like how, I mean, obviously the performance aspect of ballet is
Mhm.
must be similar to the performance aspect of, I guess, acting in various
Yeah.
different guises. But what about the chefing? Like, what did, like, have you, what's the greatest lesson that you learned from that? Like, what did you take from it?
From being a chef, I would say as a chef, we're taught to kind of measure twice and cook once. It's a bit the old sewing, cut, measure twice and cut once sort of thing. And so when I'm prepping a book, I actually prep my books twice. I take the book and I read it as I would any other book. I read it, I enjoy it. I read it in the bath. I read it while I'm drinking coffee. I take it out with me when I'm sitting in the car, and I read it as I would any other book. So I'm really getting to immerse myself in the story. And then I go back in with my narrator prep head, and then I go back and I prep it. So I know the story by then, so I don't need to stop and find anything. I know what's going to happen. But in doing it that way, it means that I can really, really enjoy the story, and I don't get any surprises. And then I focus and I hone in on the prep work, which is quite in depth for
So,
me.
okay, so I'd love to like hear about that. How long does it take you to read a book in the first instance, and then sort of how long is that process of prep work with the book?
I mean, it really depends. I'm a pretty fast reader, but it depends on the book. If it's a book like yours, I would take my time reading it and really, really enjoying it and getting to understand the characters and visualizing the world that they live in and they inhabit. And that, that would take the same time as I would any other, if I were reading any other story or book or what have you. The prep really depends on the complexity of the book. So when I was first starting, I would highlight all the characters. Each character would have a different color. I don't do that anymore. I don't need to do that. I can pick up cues from how they're speaking or who's speaking. So I don't highlight my scripts anymore. But what I do is I list all of the characters on a sheet of paper. I'm old school, so I have a sheet of paper. I list them all, and then I will, even if it's just a character who's mentioned but never speaks, I'll still list them. And it might be, so for example, Octavia, and I'll list any descriptions or descriptive factors or how she dresses or how she speaks, or does she have a stoop, or does she wear braces, or does she wear glasses, or does she push her glasses back on her nose? Does she have a twitch, or is she a fast walker, or, all those sort of things. I will make tons and tons of notes about the characters. I'll list any words that I might need help, going through my pronunciation dictionaries online, any accents, any locations, and I will just really, really dive in. And that's sort of all the prep work. And then from there, I will cast those characters as people I know or people I've seen on TV or the screen, and I will relate to them when I'm in my studio. When the time comes to record, I can then think, yeah, I can imagine, she's like Maleficent, or she's like Auntie Stella, or this one's like my stepmother, or, it makes it easy for me to then have an actual person to be inhabiting. Was that a bit long?
No, it wasn't at all. I'm fascinated by it. What who did you choose? I mean, did you say Maleficent because that's who you chose for Octavia, or?
I did, yeah. Yeah, I did.
I love that we talked about this a little bit beforehand because I'd mentioned Vesper Lind to you.
Mm.
But so that's kind of who I mean, Vesper isn't curvy enough for Octavia, but I find it fascinating. Like, what information, because from the author perspective, like, and I know this will differ with different publishers, but for me, I have to fill out quite a comprehensive document. So do
Yeah.
you receive that document? Do you receive the kind of the same amounts of information from all your authors, or do you take that into account before you read and do the prep bit, or do you do it like on your own anyway to see what's actually on the page?
No, so what I'll typically do is once I'm cast, once I'm cast in an audiobook, I'll wait for whatever information comes back. So from Podium, Podium are great. They have a very descriptive prep pack. And yours in particular, you had all these amazing pronunciations for all of the characters. So I knew I was pronouncing their names right and the places right. So I would go through all the prep pack. And Podium's is super, super in depth. And yours were amazing. And I have to say, listening to all of your snippets made me feel like I knew you. And it was really lovely hearing your voice.
Oh, so they
And it
actually
felt,
send you those recordings?
yeah,
Because I was like, hi, lovely narrators.
yeah. I didn't hear the high, lovely narrators bit, but
Oh.
they break it down. They break it down. So we have all of the individual pronunciations. And some people do that and others don't. So I go into my work with the view that I'm not going to get anything.
Okay.
And if I don't get anything, that's okay.
So I'm gonna tell you, I'm gonna confess to you,
Oh
the
no.
reason that I did that audio recording is because I didn't understand the pronunciation guide. I was like, I could not fathom the instructions in the spreadsheet for the how you break down the pronunciations of the names. I was
Phonetically,
just
yeah.
yeah, no, but it wasn't. But they weren't. It wasn't how I would do it phonetically. It was like it just read like gobbledygook to me. So I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna record it for you. But yeah, oh my goodness me. I love this. I find it so fascinating. What does the physical characteristics that you write down, so you mentioned like pushing glasses up, or
Hmm.
like some other things like that, what do those physical things give you when you're then doing the voices? Like, how does that help you?
So it's a bit like if somebody's speaking and they're pushing up their glasses, that might intonate that they're a bit nervous, right? So they may have a bit of a nervous way of speaking. They might be, worried about what they're going to say. So I might inhabit that voice as maybe a little bit not stuttery, because that doesn't lend itself well on audio, but I might, take my time in how I'm explaining things and explain it almost like if you want to say a nervous rabbit, kind of, if you want to inhabit an animal as a character, as a person, it would be nervous. Someone constantly pushing up their glasses or fiddling with their hair, or there's a difference between fiddling with your hair in a sultry way and fiddling with your hair in a nervous way.
Oh yeah,
So
there
all of
is.
those little things would come out. And so with Octavia, she was Maleficent, but she was also a bit Jessica Rabbit for me in that she was very
Yeah.
sexy, sultry. She had a real presence. And yeah,
Yeah.
so those were the kind of
I love
things that
that.
yeah.
Do those people or characters that you pick as like, I'm going to say like comp characters, because for me, from the author perspective, I pick books like comp books.
Mhm.
Do they help you create the voice as well? Like when you think about like Jessica Rabbit and Maleficent, like does that then help you create the tone, the level of husk, the level of grit, the pace of speaking?
Yes.
Or okay.
Yeah. Yeah, it really does. And it's like sometimes I've done a book where they may say the character is, based on a Finnish character in a film. And then I'll watch it and that Finnish character is like super fun and upbeat and exciting. It's like every characteristic has a way that comes out in the voice, which is then replicated and shown through audio. So yeah. definitely.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you now about like vocal range and vocal flexibility. One
Hmm.
of my favorite games to play with my son is to make up silly voices and silly accents. Both of my cats have individual voices and I will narrate for them. And I make my kid cry laughing so much, but we always kind of do silly voices and things. But that's something that I've just always been able to do. I'm not saying I'm good at it. But I can do it.
Yeah.
So what how do you create, like we've sort of talked about the psychology of how you create the comps and things, but what about the physicality of voice? Like how do you, because I have always wanted to narrate, and I've done, you know, that I've done the really short ones like the extra
Yeah.
epilogue or whatever.
Hmm.
But I don't have the balls to do a big book because I'm afraid that I won't be consistent. So I guess I'm asking two questions. The first one is like, how do you create those different voices? And the second one is how do you make them consistent so that those characters sound the same all the way through?
So, so firstly, I mean, I think it's knowing your wheelhouse, right? So I don't narrate children's books because I don't do kids' voices because my voice is far too old and raspy and husky, and I think it would be super strange. So I think for me, it's knowing my wheelhouse and where my vocal strengths lie. I get cast, unsurprisingly, as a lot of older, grittier, raspier in thriller, horror, romanticities. And I narrate a lot in my chest voice. I don't have a very strong head voice, so it's not very high. I don't sound young. So I know not to push myself. So most of the characters I would inhabit in a book would be within my chest range. You know, I can go quite low, but I can't go terribly high. It's like when I sing, I work with a couple of music producers, and when they ask me to sing, I actually say to them, you know, I'm not a singer, but I'm going to do this for you, and then it's going to make your ears bleed.
Oh, I love it. So what, like, if, okay, so how do I speak in my chest versus my throat versus my head? I don't know. Like,
Mhm.
coach me through that. How would I speak in my chest?
So you just have to physically drop it down, and it's almost like you inhabit that voice
Oh,
much lower, and you go down, and it becomes more of a gravel. I
oh my
mean,
God, I
there are
love it.
amazing. I've taken voice studying classes with amazing coaches who have tried. I have a break between my chest and my head voice, and they've tried to sort of melt that and make it better. And they're like, yeah, no, it's not going to work. So, um, yeah, I think, you know, you just also thinking about going back to the animals, um, how an animal would speak if they could speak. If it was like a,
Mm,
you know, Enid Blyton, Beatrix Potter kind of situation, how would they speak? Like a mouse is super sweet, and you would
mm.
imagine their voices to be super sweet and high and tinkly like a bell, whereas a fox would be more gravelly. And I think once you have in your mind an animal, it's easier to inhabit that voice. And I think a lot of actors would say that they have animals in their back pocket and how they move. You know, a little mouse is going quickly, so it's not so always about the tone and the level of your voice. It's about the speed of your speaking and your kind of intonation and your expression. If
Yeah, that's one of the things
yeah.
I'd be terrible at if I was a narrator is that I speak so quickly. I find it really difficult to slow down. I listen to all audio at like the lowest I'll listen to audio is 2x. So
Oh
like
my God.
I know, right? I've got one of my friends who listens to audio on one speed, and I just blink at her, and I'm like, I would die. I would actually die trying to listen to an audiobook on one speed. I'm like, what are you doing? And if I ever read a book with the audio, it's like 3.5 speed or something, and it's still
Oh
not
my
quite fast enough.
gosh.
I know, it's wild. But I find this so fascinating. Do you do anything like recording snippets or anything to help you remember? Because obviously, like you've
Yeah.
done the whole trilogy for me, for the Kingdom of Immortal Lovers trilogy, but there
Mhm.
was big gaps for you between that. So what do you do to help you remember the characters?
So each of my production companies has a folder on my Mac. And then within that folder is a book. And within that book, I will list, I will have the script for a start, and I will have any notes that the production company have given to me or my co-narrator and I have shared between us. And then when I get a book, as well as making the list of the characters and the accents and the words and what have you, I will also, as I'm prepping, I will record a couple of sentences in the voice of that particular character. And then I will mark it and I will export that as a folder. And then it's easy to share between my co-narrator and because everything will be labeled. So we can then share. And if there are ongoing series, so for yours, there was a trilogy. I've done a book series where there was, I think, 8. And then, it's important for me to maintain a library of those, because if you come back to me in 3 years' time and say, do you know, I've just written book number 4, I want to be able to refer back to my library of work that I've done for you. And equally, if Podium were to come back, which I hope they never would, if they were to come back and say, hey, we've got book 4, but they don't want you, I would then give them all the work that I've done as my prep, because it makes it easier for them. They've got something to refer to, and it's just, it's very collaborative. And then over the years of working, I've built up this library of characters. So Octavia is in your book and she will stay in your books. She is, the voice I had found for her is for her only.
Oh wow. I like this is so I've only ever interviewed one other narrator, and it fascinated me how she could like just pull out these voices. It's just like, what is going on? And she would like flip between them. Um,
Yeah.
is that is that just practice? Like, because you mentioned that you don't highlight anymore.
No.
So, I mean, I suppose if you've read it, you sort of know what's coming.
Hmm.
But yeah, I don't know. I suppose that, I mean, that's like somebody saying to me, how do you write a book? Well, I just do it.
You just do. It's like muscle memory, isn't
Yeah.
it? And I suppose it's the same with anything that you do over a period of time. And it goes back to me training as a chef. It's a bit like riding a bike, I guess, isn't it? You just know. And you
Okay.
can't explain how. It's
Yeah.
just you just know from years of training. And that's why when people hire actors or voice actors or narrators, they're not just paying for that work, they're paying for all the years of
Yeah.
training. So, yeah.
Yes, I completely agree. I would love to know, when you receive a book, how do you know that it's going to be easy to narrate, fun to narrate? And how do you know when a book is going to be hard to narrate? Like, do you get to see the samples of the book before you say yes or no?
Sometimes we get to see a sample. Sometimes we have to audition, and sometimes we just get offered a book, which is always so lovely because then we've been requested, or the production company knows that we can take this on. I have yet to turn down a book. I've never turned down a book ever. I think because, like I said earlier, I know my wheelhouse. I don't narrate children's books. I think you'll be hard pressed to find me do. I think I've done a couple of YA books, but because I'm older, I'm going to be 50 in January. Darker, huskier, raspier. I get I connect really well with the dark, disturbing,
Mm.
forbidden, powerful love. I love, you know, if somebody looks at that and goes, oh my God, that looks scary, I'll be like, give it to me.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally understand. In terms of, okay, so a lot of the listeners who listen are writers, and they might want to make sure that their book is more aligned to audio. I think nobody is denying that audio has had year after year after year of explosive growth. It's not going anywhere. So how, like, what is it about the words and the prose and the stuff on the page that you will look at and go, okay, this book's going to be easy to narrate, or this book is going to be hard to narrate? What would make something difficult to narrate for you?
I mean, I don't do nonfiction. So if I have a nonfiction to me, I don't think I ever have, but that would not, I feel like for me, this sounds a bit morbid, but life is short and I want to be narrating books that really fill me up. And if I get goosebumps when I have a book in front of me, it's like a yes, 100 million%. I need to know that I'm going to absolutely love and inhabit this world that this incredible author, like your work, from the first couple of lines of book one, I was like, yes, please. Because I do love a happily ever after and a sweet romance and a rom-com, but I think there's a lot to be said for those books that tear your heart out and that real passion in storytelling, because that's life.
Are there any like types of dialogue or phrasing that authors write that you just, you know, it so one of the things that I really dislike when I read a book is if I hear the same word over and over and over again. Like I just read well, I don't know if I should say, I'm not going to say the book. I just read a very, very popular recently released book, and there was one particular word, roiling, that was in this book over and over again. And because I listened to the audio, I could hear that repetition. And so I don't know, is there any kind of linguistic stuff that you trip over that authors do that like feels like a, something you'd put in room 101 or something, like a bad habit that authors have that you wish they wouldn't do?
No, honestly, there really isn't. I think the only thing is when I get a line that sends me into a fit of giggles, and it doesn't make it bad. It's just, it takes me out of the zone. So I think I narrated one recently where it was like, she climbed him like a tree. And I was like, ooh, yes, send me to the forest. And I was like, what? No, stop, reverse.
Oh,
and then I did another one where it was talking about, I don't know if I can say this, but.
Yeah, you can say whatever you like.
They were waxing lyrical about double fisting anal. And I remember stopping and thinking, God, that's got to really hurt.
Yeah, wasn't it my instant thought? I was like, oh, wow. I mean, is that even physically possible?
Yeah, it doesn't make it wrong. It's like it took me out of my narrator zone. I was like, oh, how does that? Ouch.
Okay, but that's a really good segue, because obviously everybody listening knows I write extra spicy. Or, I mean, I don't write erotica. Like, I'm just on the really steamy end of spice. So how do you handle steamy scenes? Like, there are probably questions from authors and also maybe from people who might be listening who might want to give, narrating themselves a go. How do you handle them? Do you have any tips either for writers to write them well for you, or for people who might want to narrate them? Any tips to help them narrate?
I mean, I feel like I'm immune in these steamy scenes, is that I don't blush. You'd have to really work very hard to shock me. So the double fisting anal was a bit of a shock.
You'll laugh this afternoon because I'm obviously outlining the next book. I was like, I found myself on this website of like a list of 300 different kinks, and I thought I was educated, I have to say. And some of the things on this list, I was like, fuck, wow, okay. Don't think I'm going to be including that one. But yeah, like you do get to a certain point, I think, if you're a steamy writer. Like
Yeah.
I literally sent a message to one of my friends, and I was like, if this character had a kink, what would their kink be? And this is like a very popular character that I'm sort of a bit like you were saying earlier with the audio comps, that I'm doing a bit of a comp for this character, and I was like,
Yeah.
what would this character's kink be? And they were like, this, and I was like, yeah. But anyway, sorry, I interrupted you.
No,
Um,
I love that. And I love that there is I love that there's a website. I mean, I often joke, I really hope I don't ever have to take my computer in. Because they'll be like, Mrs. Albers, can we please have a discussion about what you're looking at?
I know, right? Oh dear.
But
Yeah.
yeah, not
Tips
much
for.
phases me at all.
But what about for those people who are maybe newer? How did you begin narrating those steamy scenes? How do you make steamy scenes sound sexy? Because there is a difference between reading a sexy scene and then actually embodying that in your voice.
So I have a problem with my voice in that when I do generic VO, for like a commercial or a TV promo, coaches have said to me, yeah, can you try not to make that sound like you're narrating a romance? And I'm like, I'm just speaking.
Yeah.
This is all I'm doing. So I would say for a new narrator or a beginner, find your niche. Not every romance has a deep, husky, raspy. Some are sweeter and higher. So find what suits you and fits with you. Because if you're trying to go beyond your wheelhouse, as I keep saying, it's not going to feel comfortable. And then you won't feel comfortable when you come to narrate. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I listen to so many audiobooks, it's actually obscene. I probably listen to I don't know, definitely more than one a week, I would say. And that's on top of like reading books. But I listen to a range of people who are able to and not able to do spice. And like, I do think that there is a knack for it. And also like, the bravery, I think, involved in Spice, because there are certain scenes where narrators will not make kind of any, in air quotes, sounds. And then there are other narrators who make sounds. And I really think that I mean, for me, I love it when they make sounds as well, because I think like, well, I write like that. I'm like, she moaned this or she might, whatever. And I'm like, well, yeah, put that sound in, but not everybody will. What elements of description like really help? I know you kind of listed some of them earlier, but like, are there ever authors who don't give enough description? Like what happens if you don't, like, do you go back to them and say, I need more here? Or do you kind of infer? Or yeah, what should writers make sure that they are including in their stories when it comes to description that will help you?
So it depends if the book is an indie or if it's via a publisher to begin with, because typically if it's via a publisher, it's very rare that I would have that line of communication with an author. So, for example, if I have an indie book, I would prep it the same way as I normally would, but I would record everything that I would record for the characters and questions. I would then ping back to the author and I would do a first 15. So I would say, this is my studio sound. This is the pace I'm going to inhabit. And if there were parts of the book that I had questions over, I would record those too. And I would send those and I would say, is this a good scene? Or is that how do you want to change it? And it would be very collaborative. If it's with a publisher like Podium, for example, they give us so much information. And they say, the trigger warnings are X, Y, Z. And the minute you know that there are trigger warnings in a book, you know you can go, as far as you want to go. And so for me, for example, if I was a Christian narrator, there's no way I would be able to narrate the stuff I do because it wouldn't sit right with me and I wouldn't want to have that collaboration. So, I think yeah.
Well,
Does that
and
answer your question?
yeah, it does. And I think it's a great segue as well because you weren't the only person narrating the Kingdom of Immortal Lovers.
Mm.
So talk to me about what it's like to narrate a book on your own
Mhm.
versus when you narrate as a collaboration. Like, how does that change the process for you?
So I do solo, dual, and duets, and also multicasts as well.
Oh,
So I run the gamut.
would you explain for listeners who maybe haven't heard of all of those different terms what the difference is?
Sure. So solo is me on my own, and I inhabit every single character and every single gender that appears in the book. So the whole book would be narrated by one narrator. A duel is typically where I would do one chapter and my co-narrator would do the next, or the author would assign POVs to, or the publisher would assign POVs to us. So for me, I was predominantly Cordelia and Octavia, and then Shiromi, was my delicious, delightful red. So in doing that, the POV chapters that are predominantly red would be narrated by Shiromi, and the ones that are predominantly Octavia or Cordelia would be narrated by me. So that's a duel. And then a duet is where I would do all the female, and typically, if it's with a male narrator, the male narrator would do all of the male. Or if it's a duet with two females, we would do it like we're having a conversation. So you would be assigned the characters, and every single line in a conversation would be bouncing from narrator to narrator. So it's like you're having a conversation.
Do you
And
have
then a
to
multi
record? Sorry, just before you do
sorry,
multicast, do you have to be in the same room to do that?
no,
Oh my goodness me! So
no.
it must be an absolute nightmare for editing, Ben.
I mean, it is a lot more work, a lot more work. So I've done a few duets, and you would read your chapters, your lines, and then when your lines appear in your co-narrator's predominant chapters, they're called wild lines, and you would give a couple of seconds pause in between, or you would mark it or clap or click or however you do it, so that the editor could then pick out where that space is to drop the other narrator's audio in.
Wow.
It's really seamless in the end. I mean, when
Yeah.
you hear a duet, it's phenomenal. And prior to doing audiobooks, I wouldn't have had a clue that this even existed. So, yeah.
And what about multicast? What does that look like?
And a multicast is when you have more than two narrators. So you might have three, you might have four. It might be like a graphic audio, which is a multicast of many, many, many narrators, and they use special effects and music, and it's more like a movie in your mind kind of situation.
Okay, and so let's talk about, I guess, how you did the House of Crimson series. How did
hmm
you work with Shiromi? What do you guys talk? Do you what information do you share? Like, do you record at the same time? Yeah, talk to me about that kind of process of collaboration.
Yeah, so we're given a recording window that we both agree on, given recording window options by Podium that we both agreed on that worked for our schedules. And then once we know who we're working with, I mean, I know her already, so we're friends already. So we were very collaborative. We chatted on Instagram, we emailed each other. And then what typically happens is every single email and communication goes CCs the production company so they can keep a track of everything. They're so hands-on. It's unreal. And everything that you record gets dropped into a box folder so that you're shared between you, so that the editors and the production teams and the proofers can all see what's going on and keep a handle on everything. And then if there were books prior, which you did have characters that were in prior books, they would then drop the audio files from those into a folder so we have that audio reference as well. And then it's just this big, long library of audio and notes. And I see this character as this, and I see her sounding like this. And we would leave each other audio notes like, I imagine Octavia to be, and it was really very, very collaborative. And if you ever work with someone and you're like, well, I don't know, I don't that's not going to work for my voice, which has happened previously. I've worked with a narrator and we've had a very, very similar tone of voice. So we kind of did a bit of back and forth, and I'm like, well, I'll raise mine a bit and you can lower yours a bit. So it's, yeah, really collaborative.
I love that so much. Okay. What do you wish authors would do for their narrators?
I mean, I wish that they would feel happy in tagging us on social media so that we can share far and wide. But I also know that sometimes that's not possible if production companies don't like that. And sometimes people's pseudonyms are secret. Mine isn't. I'm out and, it is what it is. But that would be the only thing I would say, to not be frightened to ask your production company, is it okay for me to communicate with the narrators and for them to share
Yeah,
and tag on social media?
I love it when I see narrators do like live recordings or like
Yeah,
they share those snippets. Like that's one of the things that I'm always like, I wish we could do it.
I know, I know.
Like it's, and obviously that's one of the differences, I suppose, between going with a publisher and going with an indie author. So,
Yeah.
are there any kind of core differences like with a publisher versus working directly with an author?
I mean, the main difference is the amount of support and collaboration you get from a production company. It's beyond anything you could ever imagine, both as I would imagine as an author, but as a narrator. It's so, so incredibly helpful. And the amount of post-production marketing that they do and they send to us as narrators, they do these amazing videos, and it's really, really incredible, and it really saves us time and it gives us all support that we need, and then they have a great handle on the industry and what's working and what's not working, and their post-production teams are phenomenal, and you
So
just
that
feel like you're in part of a family. That I would say is the best thing in working with a production company.
So that's one of the things that puts me off narrating. So I have narrated two nonfiction audiobooks because they were written kind of first person from me teaching other
Hmm.
writers what I'd learned. So, but I hated editing the
Yeah.
audio. So I'm guessing you don't do that because, well, certainly not with Podium. I don't think they have like a post-production team, don't they?
They do. They have a huge post-production team and proofers and marketing teams. And it's just, yeah, it's huge. But no, I don't do that. I do work with a number of amazing Grammy award-winning post-production engineers and proofers. So I just couldn't sit down and edit and master all my own audio for indies. It just is so, so time consuming.
Oh, I completely agree. So do you sort of give the raw files to an indie or do you give them finished after they've gone to the post-production people?
I would give them finished. Yeah. So
Ah.
typically, for example, if I'm working with an indie author, I would do it via ACX. And then they need to be mastered to a certain spec to go up on ACX so that they're broadcast ready, so that, Amazon can automatically pass them through QC and then they go live. And they won't even accept them if they're not to their specs.
Mm.
So what I would typically do is I would do the first 15. I would send my raw file to my engineer. They would master it, send it back to me. I would upload it to ACX. The author would listen to it, and then they can, make changes or just be like, you pronounce that name wrong or whatever the case may be. And then right at the end, all of my raw files go to my engineer. And the same thing happens again. They master them to specs, they get the retail sample ready, and then I upload them to ACX. It's a lot more work involved in indie, for sure.
Mm.
And you don't get that additional marketing support that you
Mm.
get with a production company. With any of the production companies, you don't get that initial support. And also, it's not actually that much cheaper, because if I'm paying for an engineer, I would then have to tag that cost on to my per finished hour. So long term, it doesn't work out that much cheaper.
Yeah, yeah. Well, this is the Rebel Author podcast. So why don't you tell everyone about a time you unleashed your inner rebel?
Oh my gosh. I don't know if I'm I don't know if I'm really rebellious, but I would say back in when I lived back in the UK, and we decided to move to the States, we knew that we wanted to do something completely different, and we could have rented a property, but we decided to build our own. Because why not? We're moving to America. We've got no idea of what we're doing. Yeah, let's build a home. So whilst I was in the UK running a business and looking after 3 kids, my husband at the time was working away from home. So I was pretty much on my own. I flew back and forth to the States and worked with a builder to build my home.
Oh my goodness.
And
Is
then
that
managed.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and then I managed the build whilst I was in the UK, and yeah, we sold everything in the UK and came here and have not looked back. So I don't know if it's rebellious. I would say it's definitely brave, maybe a bit stupid. I
But
don't
pretty
know.
damn cool as well.
Yeah,
Oh,
so
well, thank you so much for your time today. Would you like to tell everyone where they can find out more about you and anything else you'd like to add?
oh, thank you so much for inviting me on and for trusting me to voice your amazing series. It has been such a joy
Oh
working with
no,
you.
thank you. I honestly like you are just the embodiment of how I heard Octavia in my head. So I'm just so grateful that you said yes.
Oh, thank you. So if people want to find out more about me, my studio is Apple Tree Audio. So it's appletreeaudio.com is my website. And then I'm everywhere on social media as Albers Actor.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for your time. And of course, a giant thank you to all of the show's listeners and all of the show's patrons. If you would like to get early access to all of their episodes, you can do so by visiting patreon.com/Sasha Black. I'm Sasha Black. You are listening to Charlie Albers, and this was the Rebel Author Podcast. Next week, I'm talking to Josie Smith all about why your writing dreams matter. So join me next week for that.
Don't forget to tune in and subscribe on your podcatcher. And when you have a moment, please leave a review.